Hi, I'm Barbara Best,
And I'm Nancy Rizzuto.
and we're both founding partners and principals of Capstrat, and we're also founders of the Capstrat Women's Forum. The core mission of our Women's Forum is to help women succeed in life, personally, professionally, and especially financially.
And we are so passionate about educating, engaging, and empowering women on all aspects of their life. So thanks for being here, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Now, Shani and her colleagues consult with organizations around the globe, helping them to transform how they work and to realize their collaborative potential, as they say. Simply, they help their clients really eliminate the barriers that prevent them from achieving greatness, which I love that. Shani, I have to say, after attending Harvard and Stanford universities and building a global consulting practice, I presume you're no stranger to perfectionism and that you've learned a few things along the way. So we really can't wait for you to share your insights so we can learn more about ourselves.
Thank you, Barbara. And hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you here on Zoom. And in fact, Barbara, my perfectionism story actually started with being at a very young age. I grew up in rural, impoverished West Virginia, and I wasn't a professor's child or like the diplomat in that environment. I was of that environment. I'm a first-generation college student. And through some incredible luck, which I won't bore you with, I ended up at Harvard as an undergraduate. And if there is anything that will activate perfectionism in you, it is being completely a fish out of a water in an environment like that. Imagine, if you will, that you had never heard of J. Crew or bagels or lacrosse. And in fact, lacrosse came to symbolize sort of everything that was hard for me about Harvard, because there was, I'm sorry, Barbara, I know you played lacrosse. There were the lacrosse girls, and the lacrosse girls were perfection. They were athletic. They were beautiful. They didn't wear makeup. They all had sandy blonde hair in the same perfect haircut. And I just walked around all the time comparing myself to them constantly and failing miserably. And it's taken me a long time to actually shake my feelings about that. So we all struggle with perfectionism, and a lot of it comes from comparison and comparing ourselves to others. But before we kind of get into, so great, what do we do about it? I thought it would be fun to start with a little quiz just to see where we're coming from. And so Nancy's going to pull up a Zoom poll for us, and I'd love for you to just answer honestly, kind of where you stand on these three statements. The first, I often feel like an imposter, that I am secretly not as talented as everyone thinks. True or false? If I make a mistake, it sticks with me for a long time. True or false? And finally, I sometimes compare myself unfavorably to other women on social media. I'll give everyone just a few moments.
Yeah. And this is anonymous.
It is anonymous, yes.
I just wanted to mention that.
I'm grading your answers.
And this is a safe space, though, So we've got 40 women who responded, which is great.
There's someone from Beckley, West Virginia on the call. We need to talk after.
I'm pretty excited about number one. That's not as bad.
Yeah. Letting go, number two seems. Okay, that was a minute. So if I end the poll, I think everybody will see the results.
That's right.
Can you see the results?
It looks like we're about half and half on imposter syndrome, which is fantastic, because actually that is also sort of at epidemic levels, especially among young people today, that you'll be found out as not being as qualified or talented as you are expected to be. Making a mistake, it does tend to stick with us, doesn't it, for a long time. And then comparing ourselves unfavorably to social media. Again, very generational. I have two nieces who are 22 and 20, and the amount of time they spend on social media is extraordinary. They are experts on everything based on that.
Oh, hold on. Barbara, can you hear Shani? Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I got someone muted me. They are constantly comparing themselves to the folks that they see, which is one of the challenges that we face in the world that we live in. So let's get into the meat of how do we actually get through this perfectionism and be our best self. My first tip of the day is if you still see yourself, you're on camera and you still see yourself, and that's an incredible distraction because we're all doing this all the time, you can right-click up at the top of your picture. There's 3 ellipses. If you click on that, you can hide self-view and you won't be distracted. And in fact, it's exhausting to look at yourself all the time. It's one of the causes of Zoom fatigue. So I encourage you to turn that off. So let's make sure we're all working from the same assumptions about what is perfectionism. So Barbara made an important distinction, which is perfectionism is not having high standards. It's actually having high standards and being overly critical in your self-evaluation against them. So that critique is the important distinction. So having high standards is fantastic, and it's a foundation for high performance. But when it goes over the line, like so many things, then it turns into perfectionism, and that has a lot of consequences. It's really a major challenge to our productivity, our performance, and unfortunately our health, to kind of be in this sort of negativity loop so frequently. I'm sure no one is unaware of the downsides and consequences of perfectionism: anxiety, depression, self-criticism, imposter syndrome, overwork, burnout. So I love the example of, was that last 15% effort that I put into something worth the result that I got? Was there an ROI on that? Or was I doing it out of an anxiety that my work is never good enough, or I'm going to be critiqued, or, someone is going to judge me, which is really a lot of what this comes down to. And there's 3 kinds of perfectionism. So there's perfectionism about self, there's perfectionism about others, and then there's perceived kind of social pressures, which is what a lot of the social media does, kind of that comparative element to it. And all 3 of those things kind of create these outcomes. We call it maladaptive perfectionism to make the distinction between high standards, which is perfectly, has a lot of great benefits, versus maladaptive perfectionism, which is the, it's classified actually as a personality disorder that causes these effects. So what's the really, really bad news? It disproportionately affects women. I'm sure there's no surprises about that information. 33% of women in a study of the workplace reported perfectionism compared to 21% of men. And they translated that into self-critique. So in that same study, 44% of women were self-critical, whereas only 34% of men were. So just imagine for a minute the amount of time and energy lost that comes from looping back on yourself to sort of, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong, versus saying, hey, wait, I think I did a great job, or it was good enough, or it got the result. That gives us a lot more freedom in our work, but we suffer a lot from not being able to do that. So what are we doing today? So what we want to do and have just done is kind of talk about the consequences of our own tendencies, but really focus on tools for overcoming that. So we've assessed the extent to our own perfectionist tendencies in a very light way. If you're interested in kind of really digging deep into that, it's very easy to find online quizzes about your degree of perfectionism. Understanding the impact of perfectionism, which we've also just talked about. Where we're going to spend the bulk of our time today is really talking about a set of mindset shifts that can help you release the hold of perfectionism on you. We're also going to take a look at the impact of perfectionism for leaders and what it does to the people that you lead if you operate from a perfectionist mindset. And then we'll end with just a few simple practices for overcoming perfectionism, and we're going to leave some time for your questions or comments. And I'm very comfortable if you want to put any comments in chat as we go. I may or may not catch them to respond to them, but feel free. I think side conversations can sometimes be one of the most valuable pieces of a session like this, so you will not bother me at all. All right, let's talk about mindset. mindsets have really come to the fore a lot in behavioral economics and psychology. People are very familiar with them, but just to establish a baseline, mindsets are the underlying assumptions, recurring thoughts that we bring to every situation. It's our belief system. And through that belief system, we interpret the things that are happening. So if you use the iceberg analogy, right, mindsets are at the bottom. They are unseen to us because they're subconscious primarily. We have to go looking for them if we really want to know what they are. But they're very important because they govern our behavior, what we do and how we do it. So given a certain mindset, you may or may not consider a set of actions. We always use the simplistic example of the trusting versus suspicious mindset. So your cousin Bobby wants to sell you a car. Bobby is, buttoned up, does everything kind of, by the straight and narrow, gives you a price. He tells you the car's been inspected, gives you the certificate of inspection. You're looking for a car for your child. What do? You probably just buy a car. Now, if your cousin Bobby was prone to gambling debt and, sketchy friends, and he says, oh, yeah, my buddy looked at it. It's fine. Here's the price. I'm sure it's good enough. You're going to double check it in the Kelly Blue Book. You're going to take it to your own mechanic to get it double certified, and you still might not buy the car from Bobby. So depending on your mindset, it just tells you what you should do in response to a stimulus. And that, therefore, determines the results that you get. So the actions that you take produce the results that you get, but it's your mindsets that tell you what actions are available. And therefore, if you want to change your outcomes, oftentimes we have to go beyond behavior back to mindsets to figure out what beliefs or assumptions we're operating from to see if they're outdated. Do they still serve us? Are they still correct for the times? Now, this is very well documented in the work of Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck is a Stanford professor who was trying to understand what caused seventh graders to succeed or fail. And what she found was two very distinct mindsets that were the drivers of performance. So on the right side, you see the fixed mindset. And individuals operating from the fixed mindset basically believe that our talents are innate and fixed. They don't grow over time. They are what they are. And so when you're operating from the fixed mindset, what you're trying to do is find what you're good at and only do that. Try to limit challenge, limit risk, protect yourself, look good, be right. And it stunts your growth because you don't want to step outside your comfort zone. You want to stay right within the middle of it. Whereas students who were operating from the growth mindset thought that challenge was how you actually grow. They were very comfortable saying, I'm not there yet. I'm not good at this yet. They were very inclined to try things. And if you gave them a problem and they failed, they would ask you for another one. I want to try again. They're inclined to try new things. And of course, those are the individuals who are growth oriented. The fixed obviously get stuck easily and then they back away from challenge. Now, Carol did this in the context of education and seventh graders, but of course, it's been co-opted into the organizational space as it should. And it has been found that teams and organizations that are able to cultivate the growth mindset collectively outperform those that are operating from the fixed mindset. And you can see, we're at an interesting time in the evolution of organizations where, fixed mindset and hierarchy and having the perfect answer was the old way. And now because of the, VUCA environment that we operate in, it doesn't actually work. You couldn't possibly have all the answers or get it right all of the time. The question is, how comfortable are you with that? Because we sit right at this generational difference where many of us grew up in a system, the old education and hierarchy system, where you had to look perfect, where you had to get it right, and you always had to be prepared. The environment that we operate in has changed dramatically, but has our way of thinking caught up with that? Well, we kind of give ourselves some slack because it's just not possible to know all the things anymore. The good news about mindsets that has been fairly recently discovered is that we also used to have a very fixed view of our brains. Like, basically you got to a certain age and all they did was decay. There was not repair, which is very depressing point of view. But in fact, we have found that there is a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity. And that is basically we can create new neural pathways in our brain. It's why that medicine advocates if you want to stave off loss of cognitive capabilities as you age, pick up a new hobby, learn a new language, drive to work by a different route, which is hard to do these days since the route to my dining room table is always the same. But you know what I mean? Like, challenge your brain to do new things, and you will actually make it more resilient, which is also good news. So when we think about perfectionism, there are 3 mindset shifts that we have found to be very helpful in trying to break the habit of being a perfectionist. It's a habit. It's a habit that is supported by the context we're in, by social signals about women in particular. And so it's not an easy habit to break. But these are 3 things that could probably help you with that. The first is going from everything matters. I must do everything to the same standard of rigor, from how I make my bed to how I give a presentation to how I help my children with their homework to how I train my dog not to charge at other dogs. I've done a very bad job with that. To really trying to zoom in on what really matters. And how can I double down on the things that really matter by not trying to do everything to the same standard. I have a very good friend from graduate school. We believe that we were put together in we were randomly assigned roommates our first year of graduate school. And we believe it's because we both said that on a scale of 1 to 10 of cleanliness, we were both a 10, and that's the only thing that matters. And when she had her first child, after every meal, she would clean the high chair, like top to bottom, like with a toothpick. I was like, they're going to eat again in like 3 hours. What are you doing? And she just could not give up the habit of everything being so clean and just so. But if she'd taken that time and energy and taken a nap, what would she have had left in her reserves for her child if she'd been able to do that? So some tactical ways to think about doing that are, at the start of your workday, at the start of your week, write down your top 3 priorities and use this to make decisions about how to invest your time. Walk away from inbox 0 or to-do list 0. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I make myself laugh because I create a to-do list that has 14 things on it, and I never get more than 2 or 3 done. I just get the 2 or 3 done that actually matter for that day. So that's one mindset shift. The second is always working on big wins versus really celebrating small ones. Psychologically, we need success and accomplishments at the small level. And if you've done prioritization, you've actually set yourself up for that. Because throughout your workday, you get to check off those priorities on your very short list as you complete them. And at the end of the day, just taking a few minutes to pat yourself on the back. You've done something hard today. You've done something meaningful. You've made someone's life better with the way that you gave them your full attention and engaged with them, right? We tend to set ourselves up as only these things matter, but these other little things, they don't matter, but they actually do. So ending your day saying, what did I do well today? What did I not do that I'm proud that I did not do? What did I criticize myself for today? How long was that talk I gave myself about not getting up and running at 6 a.m. today? If it was only 30 seconds, great. I'm winning today. Because how does that serve you? Really, there's so many opportunities to feel bad throughout the day. Do you need to offer yourself some too? Or can you give yourself some grace in terms of how you think about your day? And then finally, going from scarcity to abundance. And this is so important. Really seeing time as expansive, seeing yourself as expansive, seeing opportunity. We get very locked into a zero-sum game, and it's part of the reason that social media is challenging, because it tells us that there's only so much beauty, organization, success that is available to us, and it's already taken. It's taken by everyone else on Instagram, so there's none left for me. So how do you really reprogram your way of thinking to say, there's success enough for everybody? We can all be great at something. We can all succeed today. And some of the ways that you can do this is really trying to bookend your day. Start your day intentionally, like enter your day. Don't just kind of roll into it, scrolling headlines and, looking at social media and then kind of jumping into your inbox and getting lost in everyone else's to-dos that they have offered you as a gift in email. But really kind of entering your day with intention and then exiting it the same way. Kind of give yourself some credit. Like, I worked really hard today. It's 5:15. I deserve to sign off. I'm so glad that I had such a good day. And don't worry about what you didn't do. The amount of time that our brain spends fretting about what we did not get done today is kind of amazing, and it will be there tomorrow. And it probably wasn't at the top of your list. So good job for you for not getting it done today. It didn't need to get done today. And really take a moment to ask yourself, like, what does it feel like to say no and not to do something? We host an annual holiday party. It's a cookie competition. People bake at our house, which is insane. And this will be the 20th year, which is kind of amazing. And in the first 10 years, I made incredibly complicated appetizers. Things where I'm frying things and there's mess everywhere and I'm going to the oven every 15 minutes. And this is before I was told there was an intervention where I was told I needed to hire help for this party. And I was exhausted. And was that much better than the Popeyes chicken fingers that I now buy? No, it wasn't. And I was doing all of this work because I don't bake cookies, so I wanted to make sure I was contributing. Why? I was having a terrible time at the party because I was exhausted and I had all this work to do. So really just taking that step back to say, is it worth it? Is it going to make that big a difference in my experience and everyone else's experience? Or should I just chill out and enjoy the party? I want to give you an opportunity to really think about your own mindsets and give you a little bit of a process by which you might examine your mindsets. Because it's one thing to say, yes, I know I do err on the scarcity side, but then what do I do about it? So I don't know if anyone's familiar with the work of Byron Katie. She is a guru, basically, and she invented a process that she calls the work. She found herself at a certain point in her life having all the trappings of success and being absolutely miserable. She moved into a halfway house, left her family because she didn't deserve them. And she just was in incredible emotional pain. And one day she kind of woke up and said, I think I'm doing this to myself. What am I thinking? What narrative am I telling myself that is causing all of this pain? So she invented a process that she calls the work, which is really self-inquiry. It's just very structured self-inquiry. So you basically take a belief that is causing you pain and you ask it a few questions. Is it true? Which you're like, yeah, of course it's true. I believe it. Can you absolutely know that it's true? Just that next level of depth. How do you react? What happens when you're believing that thought? What is the impact of that belief on yourself? And who would you be without that thought? And then is there any disconfirming evidence? If you take the opposite, if you turn it on its side, what evidence can you find that that other thing is true? So I'll give you a personal example. I'm not good at math. I hate Excel. I'm not good at math. Is that true? Well, I got through graduate school, but I'm still not really that good at math. Can I absolutely know that I'm not good at math? Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who are better at math than me. Well, how do I react when I think that I'm not good at math? I feel like an imposter. How can I be the CEO of a company if I'm not good at math? Who would I be without that thought? I might be someone who's good at math. So what I've changed the frame on that to be is, I don't like math. I have very qualified people, thank you, Brenda Strong, who help me with the math part of my job. I can read Excel, I can read graphs, I can do math to the level I need to do it to be good as an organizational development consultant. I am not an engineer, I'm not a physicist, I don't need to be that good at math. And so going from this shame of I must be good at everything, which a lot of us think that in order to be a qualified professional, we have to be great at everything. But in fact, it's been proven that the best leaders are spiky. They're not good at everything, but one thing they're super good at. And so what if you took all the time that you spread out trying to be good at everything, choose the things that you want to be super good at and focus on those things? What might you be able to get out of that? So we're going to do a little reflection exercise here, which is I want you to take a couple of minutes and just write down some beliefs, some assumptions. You know, like if I make a mistake, everyone will know I'm not really good at the thing I say that I am, or my clients I won't have any credibility if I say the wrong thing or quote an inaccurate fact. Anything that kind of jumps to your mind is like, oh, that's part of the, you know, the soundtrack, the perfectionist soundtrack running in the back of my head. So take about 30 seconds and write down as many as you can think of. And then we're going to do a little work to try to turn it around. So now I want you to identify, I want you to star the mindset that you identify with the most strongly, or the one that plagues you the most. And I want you to turn it on its side. So take that belief and basically write down the opposite, the sort of inverse of that belief, and then see if you can find any evidence that it's not going to completely change your beliefs in 5 seconds, but it might just loosen that belief hold on you. So if it's I'm not good at X, then turn it into I am good at X, and then find what is the proof, what is the data that suggests you actually might be good at that. Anybody have any insights from that turnaround? That's what Byron Katie calls it, that you would be willing to share with us?
Okay, thank you. I guess my reaction is, as I wrote down a number of things, my common refrain is I'm not doing enough. I could be doing more.
What I heard you say is that sort of thought of, am I doing enough? And that is a very common thought. And the alternative to that is I'm doing too much. And what would it do to your way of thinking if you said, I am simply doing too much, and there needs to be some time to rest? We've sort of forgotten leisure as a leisure activity. We sort of do it as just fuel to work more for a lot of people versus actually really valuing leisure in and of itself. The equation seems to have gotten a little out of whack. Other reflections.
I am not good at saying no. And so trying to, I guess, give myself abundance or permission to set more boundaries. And I think that is hard at times, because you want people to say, oh, she's always available, she'll always do whatever you need. But sometimes you don't always present your best work if you're trying to get everything done all the time. And so I think that's something that we all need to give permission to sometimes say no, and it's okay.
And it's a very powerful stance. It's just one we haven't necessarily as women been conditioned to take, but to kind of assert. I don't read email on the weekend. Full stop. Well, would your career be over? What would happen if you took that stance? Now, some people are not in situations where they can do that. But I think a lot more people are in situations where they could do that than the number of people who take advantage of their ability to do that. One more reflection?
I was just going to say, just hearing that, not looking at your emails for a weekend, like I have a physical reaction to that. I'll just piggyback on what Irene was saying, that I can set boundaries, but I am also the first to violate them, which is not good, because I think I have to get it done, or because I haven't finished something. And so I need to not take the evening off or skip my morning routine or whatever it is. So I can say no on a Wednesday, but say yes on a Thursday to the same thing.
Well, thank you for the perfect segue, Nancy, because...
it was not planted either.
No, it wasn't actually. But it is really important because what does it mean when you're a perfectionist leader? What is the impact that you have on your team if you operate from perfectionist standards for yourself and potentially by transference, you operate with perfectionist tendencies towards your team? How would you know if your boss was a perfectionist? What are some of the signs you might see?
Criticizing my work all the time.
Criticizing my work all the time. That's right. What else?
Katie Hayes said high demands in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, nitpicky. Always on.
Oh, totally.
Always on.
Oh, unnecessary.
So funny. First,
go ahead.
No, please, Barbara, go ahead.
No, I was just saying unnecessary rework, reworking.
That's right. That's right. It's such an interesting thing when I go into an organization that's having a work-life balance challenge. And I ask the leader, what time do you send your first email in a day? What time do you send your last email in a day? Do you send emails on Sunday? We did a lot of work with Microsoft when they were developing their technology that actually tracks your sort of collaborative behavior. Some of you might have it. It's an Office 365 plugin. But basically, what was proven quantitatively is that managers who send emails on the weekend have employees who send emails on the weekend. And managers who don't have employees who don't. So the signals that leaders send about what is expected behavior to be good at what we do are really, really powerful. And they have an enormous impact on the culture that is set in an organization. And we've fallen into this 24/7 always on environment that's killing all of us. So it's a really important thing to be aware of. Nancy, were you going to say something else?
No, just acknowledging.
So there's a really interesting study that we're going to talk about that is about kind of best and worst leadership behavior. But I'd love to kind of get you guys thinking about this. So in chat, please put in one word to describe the best leader that you have ever worked with. Supportive, empowering, inclusive, present, empathetic, encouraging, trusting, uplifting, honest, compassionate, empathetic, multiplier. Somebody knows what we're talking about. Great. Does anyone see perfectionist? So weird. It's so weird. Okay. Now, let's talk about the worst leader that you've ever worked with. What is one word that you would use to describe them? Absent, micromanaging, dishonest, nitpicky, micromanager, unclear, insincere, demeaning, did not delegate well, critical, inauthentic, microaggressions, inconsistent, headache, unappreciative, no decision making. So this experiment has been done, pot stirrer. Oh, never think of using that as a noun. I like it. Vague. So there's some really great work that was done by the Wiseman Group, which was basically studying the question that they were studying, Liz Wiseman, it was what makes some leaders be able to get the very best out of their people and what causes some leaders to get a lot less out of the people that work for them. So one of the fundamental things that they looked at is kind of like, okay, for the best leaders, would you describe them? For the worst leaders, how would you describe them? And they found that there were some fundamental assumptions that drove that leader behavior. So they used the terms diminisher and multiplier, unless you start to evaluate and criticize instantly. There are a lot fewer intentional diminishers in the world than there are intentional multipliers, but they use the term accidental diminishers. We can fall into these behaviors partially when our own perfectionism gets activated, and then we're starting to push that onto others. So diminishers are acting from the mindset or the assumption that people won't figure it out without me. If I don't help them, they might fail. Whereas multipliers kind of come at it from people are smart and they're going to figure it out. And you can also hearken back to fixed mindset, versus growth mindset, right? The fixed mindset is they're not good enough to figure this out, or they don't have the experience, or they're not going to see the things that I can see. And the multiplier mindset which is a growth mindset, which is they might see something I don't even think of. So let's let them kind of have their chance to figure it out. And what happens with these two kind of leadership profiles is that diminishers have the tendency to create a stressful environment. And what does stress do? It shuts down our frontal cortex, and we can't think as well because we're back in the back trying to figure out whether to fight, flight, or freeze. So it gets less out of us. They decide, and then they hold fake debates. They're insincere and inauthentic because we're having a conversation, but I already know what I'm going to do. They're micromanagers. They hoard talent because I want my people to be the best. Whereas multipliers attract talent, elevate them, and then watch them fly off to their next grand assignment. They create the next leadership bench. They create a lot of space for people to have good thoughts. They give people stretch challenges. They debate, and then they decide. And they give a lot of ownership and accountability, kind of the things that we want in the best managers. And as a result, when you ask people, well, that worst boss, what percentage of your effort, of your best effort did they get? It's less than 50%, whereas the multipliers got around 95% or a lot more. When you do this, you often see things like they got 120% of my best thinking, like they really got great versions of me. And so perfectionism doesn't just negatively impact us. It impacts our ability to be the leaders that we want to be in the world because it gets contagious. And then we just start to apply those standards to everyone else, which is why it's such an important thing to be conscious of and to try to correct. Because if we're responsible for that next bench of women leaders, we don't want them to go through what we've had to go through to prove ourselves in a world of standards that are sort of silly. So what are some of the things that you can do to overturn this in your own organization? One is to focus on appreciation versus criticism, right? We kind of are much better at problem finding than we are at sort of reward seeking or sort of things to appreciate. But really try to recognize effort as well as outcome from the team. Reward them for prioritization. Like the hardest thing for someone who works for you to do is say no, or to say, I can't get to that yet, or what would you like me to reprioritize? If you reward them, they will do more of it. Be vulnerable. Tell them that you're feeling, nervous or concerned or worried, and ask for their help because people want to help each other. Try to take back that busyness badge of honor. Don't send emails on nights or on weekends. It's very easy to put them in your draft folder. And people think that I am the most productive person in the world at 8 a.m. on Monday, because that's when I go to my draft email and I just send them all. There you go. Although don't send them all to your team or they're going to be totally stressed out too. And don't be in a business all the time, right? We're human beings. Like human connection can really override that sense of mechanical perfectionism that we're, that's what we're expecting from each other. No, we're not. We're expecting to be human beings who have complex lives and are trying to do our very best. And some days we succeed at that, and some days, it was okay, but it wasn't great. So I want to give you 3 kind of final practices before we open it up for questions and kind of see what's on your mind. And I will not take credit for these. We just had a speaker in at a client event. His name is Neil Parisha. He wrote the book of Awesome, The Happiness Equation, and You Are Awesome, which I highly recommend because you are awesome. And he recommended these practices, and I just think they're brilliant. The first is the precursor to this is take your cell phone out of your bedroom. Lovely story, which is he said, if you had a bottle of wine before you went to bed, and then you had one sitting on your nightstand overnight, and then you had another one when you got up in the morning, what would people say? Or, what would that mean about you? But that's exactly what we do with our phones. We're consuming them mindlessly. And so he said, get an alarm clock. And when you wake up in the morning, if you could spend a few minutes thinking about what will I let go of? That might be a mistake that I've made, something I'm worried about. Like, what are you going to let go of? What are you grateful for? And it should be specific, not, I'm grateful for the smell of the cinnamon candle that I lit yesterday to remind myself that it was fall. And what are you going to focus on? Which really kind of gets to those priorities and like what really matters today. The second recommendation is just turn off the social media. We all know what it does. And the third is back to that neuroplasticity, reading fiction. He reminded us that it actually activates mirror neurons in our brain, and it makes us happier and more empathetic to put ourselves in the shoes of other characters, which is one of the hidden benefits of reading fiction, besides the fact that it's just real fun. Or cultivate a hobby that you're bad at. I took up boxing as part of my quarantine rituals, and I will not be in a ring coming near you anytime soon, but I really love it. And it's kind of another way to use my brain. So happy to turn it back to Barbara and Nancy and or answer any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, if you have any, just feel free to put them in the chat. We have about 10 minutes left.
We had one earlier, which I really appreciated. Nancy had shared, Snyder had shared, why is perfectionism an issue that affects women? Is it, what is it in women that creates that?
I think there's a lot of messaging. I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts on this as well, but there's a lot of messaging. There was that whole movement about you can do it all. And then the halting back, no, you can't. You cannot do it all. But the parenting on display and the sort of subtle competition that happens kind of in communities around, are you a good, your kids aren't in this camp and that camp and with a tutor and they're not already doing community service, right? Like that disproportionately affects moms for sure. And then the sense of, well, the possibilities have opened up for women in leadership for sure. It's yes, yes, misogynistic culture. But with that, the norms, which are very male oriented, have not kept pace. They have not shifted sufficiently. So we're sort of playing a game that is not designed for us. I don't mean that quite as badly as it sounds. It's just like what success looks like is fueled by women at home taking care of all the other things so that the breadwinner can go off and win bread. And it's not well designed for the requirements of women. And then we just take that on because we have a very strong sense of responsibility hardwired in for many people. That's my 2 cents on it, but I'm happy to be refuted or see if anyone else has any thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I think Cynthia just posted a comment that kind of reinforces what you just said, Shani.
Yeah, I would, and I think I would share that sentiment, especially as I've been exploring more like even race-conscious biasness in terms of just, the benefits of a Caucasian male and other attributes that create that, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another a question I had, Shani, was, you said, just if you didn't get it done, just tell yourself, like to be kind to yourself. But when, as a perfectionist, if you have a chronic, I need more time. I'm not going to get to this because I have to carve out more time. And that more time never quite happens, right? So you keep pushing off and it can create a lot of procrastination when you have this perfectionist element. So how do you overcome that reluctance?
One of the things that we have instituted as a practice that I really like, which is like kind of the 20-minute rule or the 25-minute rule if you're working on the Pomodoro technique. But it's like, just work on something for 20 minutes and then pass it off to a colleague and say, hey, where do you think I am? Where would you go next with this? This is kind of a challenging task. And A, they'll probably do 2 things. They'll probably offer you some really great ideas. And B, they'll calm you down a little bit because they'll say, oh, I think this is 80%. This is great. This presentation that we saw today had many people's hands on it because it was like, okay, we've got some ideas and a general design of the territory we want to cover. I passed it off to someone else. And they did some and they passed it back to me and then we passed it off to someone else. And that's a way to get the weight off of your shoulders. And the thing that's causing you to procrastinate, like anybody can do anything for 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Set a timer, dig into it, turn off your emails, close all the distractions, work on it for 20 minutes. If you got it far enough, send it to someone else if you've agreed and they have time to work on it. And then they can work on it for 20 minutes and then they can bounce it back. And it's just like, it lightens the load a lot for everybody. And it's much more fun.
Yeah, there's so many things in this workshop that really resonated with me. And I love the concept of entering your day. I think that how you wake up and how you show up for yourself first thing in the morning just really lays everything out for the rest of the day. And, I read a quote recently about that. It's not that we need more time, it's that we need more time with the things that matter. And, to your point, focusing on those things that matter and coming up with what is it you want to get done today kind of thing as priorities. It's really helpful. So we have 5 minutes left.
Actually, Shani, I had another question here for her.
Oh.
Shani, what are you excited about that's coming up in your work?
For this really important moment, right, where people are returning to office, sort of, and we're in this kind of hybrid work environment. And it's any of you who have been, experimenting with that so far recognize it's the worst of all worlds, right? Because it's a terrible experience for the people who are still remote, the people who are gathered together haven't quite all figured it out. And so there's an opportunity to up-level the quality of collaboration in organizations leveraging this time. But our standards are it's funny that I'm saying this in perfectionism workshop, and I'm going to say our standards are really low, but they are for how we use our time when we're collaborating with others, right? Meetings are terrible. We sit in a lot of informed meetings. We multitask the whole time. So we're distracted and we're actually taking power out of our brain by doing that because we're task switching, which is very mentally costly. And so helping organizations take advantage of this to sort of step back and say, are we working in a way that brings out the best in everyone, right? Because, diminishers get 48% of the people that work for them, but the average organization only gets about 60% of our best work because we're pulled into just a bunch of collaborative junk that doesn't advance anything for anybody. But it's what is, and we're used to it. And so there's an inertia that has developed around it. So finding people who are ready to kind of crack the code on that and do something different, that's what I'm really excited about with this next year and a half.
Yeah, that's awesome. This has been such an inspiring program. And maybe, Shani, you want to mention the guide that you have created that speaks to perfectionism.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. We just wrote, we periodically put out guides like how to do hybrid work, how to actually take a vacation and not be stuck working the whole time. And our most recent one, which just came out last week, is a guide to pulling the plug on perfectionism. So if you think anything we talked about today might be useful for someone that you love or on your team, you can get it on our website, stopmeetinglikethis.com. And I think that my chief of staff might post a link in chat as well, where you can just click and download that as well.
We'll also have the link posted in the recap and on our website when we put this recording on it as well.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I was thinking about our culture at our firm. And I know that we are huge advocates of managing our mindset and really focusing on what matters, honoring the things that you can control, letting go of the things that you can't, and really striving to be present rather than perfect. So, Shani, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm sure everybody on this is walking away with really some amazing nuggets that they can take action on, because that's what it's about, is being sure that we're taking action on some of your messages.